Well, it's fair to say that the UFC has had its fair share of stars and bloody knockouts over the years. There are some fighters, however, who left more than a mark on their opponent over the years, leaving a mark on the league itself and changing the Ultimate Fighting Championship as we know it. So, without further ado, here are the fighters that completely changed the UFC, for better or worse. Let's start with worse, or better, depending on how you see it. While the first ever inaugural UFC event was lauded as having no rules, things have changed. Modern UFC now abides by an exhaustive rulebook. A rule set that seems to be missing, however, the rules of decorum, especially surrounding nepotism, pertaining particularly to the elephant in the UFC ring, the one that's been dominating the fights for the past decade. Yeah, you know where this is going. The one, the only, Conor Notorious McGregor. Conor, who is arguably the most successful and well-known fighter of his lifetime, has been known to be called UFC President Dana White's baby. Okay, so Conor isn't Dana's actual baby, but it definitely doesn't hurt to have the president of your workplace also be the president of your fan club. But can you really blame Dana? Conor's gotten a lot of titles under his belts, pun intended. While sometimes these wins take hard work, dedication, luck, plus a whole lot of sweat, blood, and tears. Sometimes all it takes is 13 seconds. Yep, just 13 seconds in the ring with McGregor was all it took for Jose Aldo, who at the time in 2015 was a long title-holding featherweight champ, to lose his title and belt to the Irishman Conor McGregor. With this fight, Conor's ascension to superstar status was complete. Conor wasn't ready to let that win beneath his sails go to waste. Oh no, he put it to good use. Rather than being content with the featherweight champ, Conor immediately set his sights on becoming the UFC's first two-division champ. And while this journey presented some challenges, such as McGregor's first opponent, Rafael dos Anjos, having to pull out due to injury, then shockingly losing a fight to Nate Diaz in only 2 rounds, which Conor quickly made up for in a rematch, Conor finally made it across the finish line when he beat the then current lightweight champ Eddie Alvarez in a 2-round fight. On this night, Conor became the first UFC fighter to hold 2 divisions championships. It also marked his 3rd belt in less than 2 years. Well, they don't call him notorious for nothing. So while Conor clearly excels in the octagon, it's not just his physical fighting tactics that set him apart from the rest. Oh no, Conor is a remarkable trash talker, like one of the best. One of his most infamous quotes comes from the Chad Mendes pre-fight press conference. "I'm not a celebrity. I break people's faces for money and bounce." Well, that's definitely a few people's dream job. Another great thing about trash talking, it doesn't just help lull your victims into a state of panic and insecurity. It also fattens up your pockets. Nothing like a good show to get the dollars coming in. Probably another reason Dana White thinks of Conor as his golden boy. Conor's fights are known to draw in some serious dough. His own personal earnings alone from all his fights total, over $25 million. What's good for Conor must be great for the UFC. Now that we've touched on UFC's resident darling, it's time to share the spotlight with some of Dana's other kids, namely Brazilian-born Anderson the Spider Silva. With a nickname like that, it would be hard not to be intimidated with Anderson as your opponent. Known for not only his outstanding striking abilities, Anderson also has a keen ability to predict his opponent's next moves, getting into their heads and playing mind games, disarming them, then striking. Okay, no wonder he's called the Spider. All of these talents work together to help make Anderson make history. While he is a former middleweight champion of UFC, he is a UFC record holder, owning his middleweight champ belt proudly for nearly 7 years, 2,457 days to be exact. The Spider is in good company with those record-breaking numbers. American fighter John Bones Jones has a couple of numbers to add to the list. The first being his insanely large reach. Seriously, it's huge. At 85 inches, Jones' reach is a record breaker for UFC. And maybe Ripley's Believe It or Not, too. In addition to his claim to fame reach, Jones is also known for an unorthodox fighting style. Despite the fact that Jones is 6'4", and height often used to be looked down upon in the UFC as a disadvantage, Jones used his lanky body to give him an upper hand and longer strike, so to speak. The former light heavyweight champion, who has a 26-win, 1-loss record, is frequently regarded as being an undisputed champ. Despite the fact he has 1 loss recorded, the loss was a technicality, only due to disqualification. Jones later on relinquished his long-held title with the hope that Dana White and UFC would cough up the money he believed he deserved for the crowds he drew in his fighting abilities. John spent over 3 years bulking up to come back to the octagon, this time for the heavyweight champ belt. And guess what? Despite 1,000 days off, John Bones Jones returned, and in March 2023 became the new heavyweight UFC champ. But why should the boys have all the fun? Ronda Rousey, who one could say is equally as infamous as her male counterparts, helped land women's MMA and UFC on the map. Rousey is the first American woman to receive an Olympic medal in judo. Rousey took her judo abilities and infused them into her octagon fighting tactics. Known for her incredible grappling abilities, Ronda has proven it a walk in the park to have her opponent submitting to her with ease. Rousey was the first female fighter to sign to the UFC in 2012. Since then, Ronda boasts 12 wins and 2 losses. Ronda held the UFC Women's Bantamweight Championship for almost 4 years, or 1,074 days. Ronda defended her title through 6 fights. Throughout those 6 bouts, Ronda only spent 1,077 seconds in the octagon fighting. Throughout those 1,077 seconds, Ronda garnered over $1 million for her time and efforts. That's about $1,003 per second. Aside from being an absolute armbar legend in the octagon, Ronda's accomplishments in the league sets her apart as a trailblazer for women in a category that is still underrepresented and underserved to this day. Ronda managed to bring a much-needed and high level of visibility and publicity and money to women's fighting. May all female UFC fighters follow in Ronda's footsteps and rake in over $1,000 per second in the octagon. Amen. Ronda's impact on the pockets and visibility of the UFC has more to do with than just her impressive fighting skills. Ronda's rise to fame in women's UFC marks her as a role model. Now that her name has become synonymous with the UFC, there's no doubt that Ronda has hopefully inspired more young women to pursue the sport. Now that the general public has witnessed women's fighting to be not only just as skillful, but also just as entertaining, there's no doubt this is an area that is due for a lot of growth and exciting matches against a new generation of female fighters for decades to come. So, who will make UFC history next? Will they have a 100-inch reach? Will their trash-talking reduce their opponents to tears before stepping into the octagon? Only time will tell what the future of the sport holds. But there's no denying that with what UFC has seen, accomplished, and had change in the past 30 years, the sport has many exciting and unpredictable milestones to reach in the near future. So, from Conor McGregor's nearly unbeatable abilities and his world-renowned trash-talking to Jon Jones' record-breaking wingspan and Ronda Rousey's history-making career, these were some of the fighters that completely and totally helped change the ever-evolving landscape of UFC.